begin sharing the presentation.
Yes, sir, we can see your screen.
Yeah. So the agenda of the day is we will begin with how well do we understand numbers used in macroeconomics? Do these numbers project optimism? Then a big question. Can we replace China in lowering global inflation? And in this process, how does that translate into opportunities for everybody, including the project managers? Then, of course, we will have some question and answers. So we start with our first question. How well do we understand numbers used in macroeconomics? So what are these numbers that we pertain to? For example, GDP growth rate, or per capita income, inflation rate, interest rates, fiscal deficit, credit growth rate, current account deficit, purchase managers index, exchange rate, unemployment, and there are so many of them. So is there a good understanding about each one of them, or there is some confusion? So we can set that confusion right now. You are allowed to speak in between. I don't mind if you interject, and if you ask any questions in between, I don't mind. All right. So in the process of presentation, we will keep discussing about these things. Let me take you to the story of India's GDP growth in the last 50 years. So if you look at this growth chart from 1970 till about 1990, if you see that the GDP growth is very steady and very flat. And during this period, largely India was a closed economy. That means we had shut the country from any kinds of imports unless those were essential. For example, some technology, food grains, oil, things like this. We were very short of foreign exchange. We just didn't have any exchange. The country had been totally robbed off by the English. So, fearing the huge amount of constraint that we had in terms of foreign exchange, we did not want people to splurge the scarce foreign exchange on other things.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Can you be a bit louder?
Uh, so I am saying that we had a very flat growth rate from 1970 till 1990, and initial few years we used to be mocked at as Hindu growth rate of 2%. And largely this was because we were a very closed economy, fearing that we had very little foreign exchange available. So we did not want to open this usage of foreign exchange to unnecessary things. So we kept it confined to spending on oil, technology, food grains, or other essential things. Unfortunately, till 1980, we did not have we did not have much concern about macroeconomics. We did not even have much of studies on macroeconomics. All industries were looked at standalone. There was no integration being seen. And because of that, the policies seem to be altered. For instance, if we talk about the electricity network that we have, we never realized that we have a very vast country, huge land size. So if we need to develop a electricity network, so it should not be a very small capacity networks here and there somewhere. But if we had seen things in totality, we would have very high capacity transmission network across the country right at the beginning. But we never did that. We kept developing, and because of that, now the cost of power seems to be very high for India, and it brings a lot of incompetency for our industries. 1990, 91, you would remember that we had run into balance of payment crisis. This balance of payment crisis meant that we did not have adequate amount of foreign exchange available with us so that we could import the essentials for next few weeks. In this situation, we dawned upon the liberalization, privatization, and globalization initiatives by Dr. Manmohan Singh and PV Narasimha Rao. And after that, as we opened up, of course, there was a small dip. And after that, you will see that the slope of increase, slope of GDP growth, initially it was slightly above than this. And then we started growing. Somewhere around 2002 onwards, we started growing in a much faster manner. Large credit goes to the demand of the world. Global demand grows. This global demand was rising, and then global GDP was increasing at 4.5% also. That means everybody was getting very rich, and the money supply in the economy was rising. People were getting rich, and hence they were importing a lot from the emerging economies. India benefited a lot because of that. But all those riches, they culminated into somewhere here, they culminated into the global financial crisis. India was not so much affected by it, as we had put in a lot of economic stimulus, both in terms of money supply as well as taxes. And since then, we see that gradually the growth rate is very, very high. But at the same time, it is turbulent also. It goes up, it comes down, goes up, comes down, and then comes down again. Why does it keep happening? Because we are more integrated with the world economy. What does this mean? This means that even if a country like Iceland or Greece get into problems, our economy gets affected. We quickly grow and then we quickly fall. We quickly grow and then we again fall. So this kind of a turbulence, which is called business cycles, this has come. You see here, the business cycles are largely missing in this region. But as we get more integrated with the world economy, our incomes did rise. The GDP did rise a lot. But with that, we had lots of dips, a lot of downsizes, and the inequality in the economy has increased. Now we are somewhere here because of the virus pandemic. We declined by 24%. And recent data, the first quarter data of 2021-22 shows that we rose also by almost 20%. A quick recovery. And where do we see that India is going from here? Any questions you would like to ask with this regarding this story that I have told you before we move on to the next?
Y-axis is $1 billion. Is it trillions?
No, this is the growth rate that we are talking about. What did you ask about the GDP? You asked about what is being measured on the y-axis.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So
percentage growth.
these are $1 billion.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
GDP in $1 billion. So you could see that after 2010, after the crisis, the amount of stimulus that has been given, it has led to a very sharp increase in just 8 years, 9 years. We were able to amass 870 million, around $1 trillion in 8 to 9 years of time. This is a fantastic growth that has happened. Unfortunately, we have come down because of the pandemic, but at the same time, we seem to be rising. And IMF says that we will rise by around 9.5%, and this is considered to be the highest amongst the all large economies. Small economies can definitely have much larger growth, but if we compare ourselves with the large economies, so this would be the highest growth rate we will record. That means this is an amazing strength of the economy, that we can quickly surmount the pressures of this kind of a global virus attack. In quarterly growth, you will see that since July 18, the growth rate has been coming down. Does that mean we've been in recession? A large number of people have said that India is in recession for quite some time. Leading economists have also many times written that India is into a recessionary situation. It is into recession. The growth rate is coming down. So growth rate coming down does not mean that we are in recession. It only means that the increase in our GDP is slowing down, but still the GDP is rising. And recession is defined as at least two quarters of consecutive decline. That means reduction. But for several years now, we've been seeing that large number of economists, large number of political leaders, they've been saying that India is into a recession. And when we actually went into recession, because of the virus, which is a decline of 24% and then a decline of around 7.4%. This is when we actually got into recession. So what did the newspapers report then? They said now India has gotten into something called technical recession. Now ask anyone, what is the difference between recession and technical recession? There is no difference at all. But the kind of sentiment expressed throughout this time, even before that, the sentiments being expressed were that we are into a recession. And when these kind of sentiments are expressed, do you think that it will have a good impact on the spending of the people of the country? Look at the situation that today, September 2021, you feel that next 2 years, my income will be reduced. And other situation is that my income will rise substantially. Your today's spending, does it depend upon this feeling that tomorrow your income will be slashed to half or it will double? Any responses?
I see
If
one answered as yes in chat window.
so, we see that if we are constantly told that tomorrow your income is going to be lesser, which means there is recession, then we are very cautious on spending. We will not spend much. And if I don't spend much today, what is the virtue of spending? When I spend, I make someone else rich. When that person spends, he makes another person rich. That is how a virtuous cycle gets triggered. But in this case, what is happening as more and more people are trying to sober down the sentiments and probably scare you that coming times are going to be very, very difficult. So the spending here reduces. As the spending reduces, what will happen to GDP? The GDP will automatically start falling because as you spend less, you make the next person less richer. And he also spends less, the next person further gets less richer. And gradually we get engulfed into poverty. Nobody realized it. Very senior economists also mentioned that it is going to take a large amount of time in order to come back to the old levels of GDP. And now we see that by the end of this year, by December, we will touch somewhere around $3 trillion. In 2019, the Prime Minister said that we want to be $5 trillion economy. And there were a lot of questions asked at that time, how are we going to do that? And it seemed as if it is an impossible task. Despite all these negative impacts, even in 2020, even in 2021, we still say that we will become a $5 trillion economy by 2024. Whether this is possible or not, we will see in the subsequent slides. And what are the factors that are making us look optimistic towards reaching this kind of a figure? What is the impact of inflation on India? Let's say this is China and it has an inflation of 1%. This is India. And if you see that between 2012 to 2014, in fact, from 2010 onwards itself, and before that also, our inflation has been ranging somewhere above 8%, largely in this time. And what happens if you have inflation of 8%? That means if the inputs cost 100 rupees in this year, next year they will be 108. Let's say if it is 10% and an average, so this will be 110 and this will be 121. So in 2 years' time, the cost has increased by 20%. So if you've bought land and you built a factory on it at this high price, what happens to your competency in the international market? On one side, China is growing at, let's say, 1%, the prices are growing at 1% or 2%. In India, it is growing at 10%. Who would be more competitive after, let's say, 5 years? China, of course, will be more competitive. So these years of high inflation have eroded the competence of the country for several years because all these high prices are now embedded into the assets which people have bought in order to manufacture or provide services. We are seeing at present that inflation went up and it has come down now. It is somewhere around 5.5%. RBI says that best inflation rate for India is 4% within a band of plus 2% and minus 2%. So we are here, and largely this high figure is also because of some essential things which like mustard oil, edible oils, high protein food, all these things, their prices are rising. Should these prices rise? Of course, these prices should rise fast because we want the farmers to earn more already. As they earn more, the rural GDP will increase, rural purchasing will increase, and the capacity utilization of our companies will increase fast. And this is what we want. So this, what is other contributor to this inflation? 5.5 is still manageable as per our RBI, how RBI describes. It would have been even less if the petrol prices, if the crude oil prices were low. Now, why is crude oil price rising? Crude oil price is rising because we see that under OPEC, two of the main uh, friends of OPEC, we have Saudi Arabia and we have Abu Dhabi. They have now conflict of interest. Abu Dhabi understands that the way renewables are growing and the way there is a demand for electric vehicles, very soon it will be left with a lot of oil available and people would not want it. So it wants to monetize that and it wants to increase the supply. But OPEC says that we cannot increase your quota. So they say, no, we want to increase our production. So as the production increases, in this, can our monetary policy or economic policy do anything in order to control this? Nothing. We cannot do anything. So we'll have to live with that for some time. But already we are seeing that these conflicts are gradually being resolved and the oil prices had cooled down to some extent. And in future, Abu Dhabi will definitely increase their supply and the oil prices will come down and this inflation is also expected to come down. But globally, we see that there is a fear of inflation for other countries also. We will see that. Look at inflation in China. Throughout, it's been less than 6%. So for so many years, their inflation has been less and they were conscious. Many of our governments were not very conscious of controlling inflation in the right time. And currently they have somewhere around 1% inflation. They still have a lot of advantage. But a big disadvantage that China has at present is, of course, the globally, they are becoming less suitable partners. Number two, their per capita income has increased. If per capita income increases, what will happen to cost of production? Cost of production will rise. So the cheap goods which they were able to produce, they will not be able to produce that much. Aging is another factor. And many other factors which are now responsible, which are tending to slow down China. Even after the pandemic, though they were not affected as much as they say that they have not been affected. But the GDP forecast for China is somewhere around 8.1%. For us, it is 9.5%. Look at US. US also has had very low inflation, less than 4%. That is providing a lot of competitive advantage to them. But gradually, because of very high, very liberal monetary policy, which is quantitative easing, which they say. And this quantitative easing is nothing but printing of money. With rampant printing of money, $120 billion per month. This kind of a spend and production being restrained, the prices are definitely going to rise. And they see that this kind of a pricing of around 5.5%, they're also reporting. And this is unprecedented in terms of US inflation. They are traditionally very low. And this is the kind of pricing inflation they had seen in 1970s, middle 1975 or so. And it led to a big problem of stagflation in the US. So US, we see that because of rampant printing of money, which they cannot stop at present, they will have to continue it for some time. Though people are saying that very soon we will see tapering of that, but the economic compulsion will require them to print more money, and this inflation is going to rise, which is definitely in some way benefits India. This slide I had prepared. I thought that we could explain that how rising inflation in one country, in China or in US, will have an impact on India's exports. But for the present, I am not going to talk about it. If someone wants to know, we will do that. Current account deficit. Current account deficit is whatever is our exports, largely exports, plus uh, remittances, plus interest earning, minus imports, largely imports, but here also remittances going out of the country and interests that we pay. This has largely been negative. In 2014, it was somewhere around 4.5%, negative 4.5%. We saw it turning into surplus in 2020, although it was not best of the conditions because the import had actually come down. But now, as things have eased out, we see that this current account deficit is minus 1%, which is fairly manageable, which is pretty good. We need to import a lot because we need to feed a big nation and create employment opportunities, because of which we have to import a lot of technology and oil. So this will definitely, we will remain in negative for some time. But low negative figure is pretty okay, because this gets offset by the amount of FDI that we get. What does this mean? Negative exports, negative current account deficit means exports will bring dollar. Imports will take away dollars. So if we have persistent deficit, that means we will be short of dollars. But this is getting compensated by FDI that we receive. And this has increased for the June quarter, it has increased by 168%. This is a big increase. PMI, which is Purchase Managers Index. This shows the sentiment amongst the purchase managers. So PMI is for services as well as for manufacturing. This shows the sentiment of the people who are doing buying on part of the companies. So in January, we had come up to 52.8, February it rose to 55.3, 54.6, 54, and then again because of the second wave, we kept declining. Anything below 50, below 50 means pessimism. So we were optimistic all this while. We had thought that we won over the virus, but the second wave came and it devastated the services sector. This is for services. And we saw it coming down 50 and significantly down 41.2, which means a very, very pessimistic scenario. But by August, we see it has bounced back beyond 50. 56 is an excellent optimistic sentiment for services sector. And this is composite, which means mix of manufacturing, and manufacturing we had rebounded much earlier, and which shows that in August, the mix of manufacturing and services is also a lot of optimism. So we can expect to have pretty good growth in the coming times. This is slightly theoretical thing. those who are aware about economics. So all prices, they are determined by interaction of demand curve and supply curve. So this is aggregate demand, and these curves are supply curves. This one is supply, supply, supply. As supply increases, what we are showing here is that if there is productivity growth, it shifts the aggregate supply to the right. Now, world over, what is being done? All central banks are printing more money. A large number of global economists, they said that pump more money into the economy. Helicopter money. What is helicopter money? That you just throw money from helicopter so that people have more money and they will buy. So all the central banks are printing more money. When I say all the central banks, largely Japan, European Union, and US. So they've been printing so much of money that demand has been rising. So the interaction of supply and demand tells you about what will be the price in the market. As demand rises, what do you think will happen to price? Price will definitely rise. So this is giving a global inflationary situation, pumping of all this money. So how can it be brought down? It can be brought down if there are productivity growths in the country. In India, if the productivity grows, that means if one labor was earlier producing 2 units, and now if it is producing, one labor is more qualified and he gets better machine to work at, and he is able to produce 4 units. What will happen to supply? For the same prices, same wage rate, the supply doubles. So if your demand supply situation was this and the price was 10, so if supply increases, this is supply curve, it increases. What happens to prices? Prices come down to 6. And at the same time, GDP of the country also rises. GDP also rises. So this is the sweetest thing that can happen to an economy, that you increase the output from GDP increases from Y to Y0 to Y2, and the prices also keep falling down. And I'm building a case that this is what can happen in India. And if the prices can come down, so can we reduce the global inflation? Can we contribute in reducing the global inflation? Going to skip this. Our economy, how does the money move in our economy? This is the consumers, us. And this is where companies, so all economy, we say they have 2 sections. There are consumers and there are producers, companies. As companies hire the consumers to produce things, so it generates income. Some part of this income, and then these people, these consumers, will spend on goods and services which companies have produced, and it will come back to the companies as revenue. So this is why we say it is a circular flow of money. In between this circular flow of money, we see there are some leakages that, for example, people have to pay taxes. So their ability to spend will decrease. That is where the government has come in. As the government comes in, it puts in some amount of taxes and some amount of subsidies. This is your financial system. And these are investors. This investors and firms we will take to be the same. This is rest of the world. So let us say 100 rupees income is generated. And out of that, 10 rupees goes to the government as tax. And out of those 10 rupees tax, the government pays back to consumers as subsidy, LPG subsidy or some subsidy, rupees 5. So total income that the consumers will have, let us say this is 20, will 85. Out of this 85 rupees, 10 rupees move out of the circular flow, they go to the financial markets. How does that go? It could be fixed deposit, it could be insurance, things like this. So all that goes into the financial markets. So if financial markets have 100 rupees with them, let us say it has 10 rupees with them. And these are the borrowers, the producers, the companies. If they want to borrow 15 rupees, what will happen to interest rates in the economy? Since they are wanting more than what financial system has, so the interest rate will go up. So what has Indian economy done at present? They have put in a lot of money in the financial system. Liquidity is high. And who does this? RBI has done it. So it has provided so much of liquidity in the financial system that interest rates are low at present. So if ultimately the consumers do not spend much and it is expected that only 80 rupees will accrue to these companies who have already spent 100. So that is where government will intervene and it will say that let me spend a little more. This is what the government is doing at present because people spending has reduced. So the government has increased its spending. And on what kind of, how are they spending more? For example, they have initiated a Sagarmala project under which how much money will be spent? 7 lakh crores of money will be spent. Bharatmala, various bridges initiatives, waterways, all these projects which are being initiated by the government, feeding 80 crore people for the entire year. Health expenditure increased. So around 90,000 crores was mentioned, but we ended up spending around 2.23 lakh crores. This way, the government is trying to compensate for the expenditure that is happening in the economy and revive the economy. This total, all the spending that we do, the consumers do a spending of C, the investors do a spending of I, the government does a spending of G, and the rest of the world export minus import. This together makes your GDP. So at present, the government is spending a lot in order to maintain the GDP. One way it is to maintain the GDP. Other thing is, then when you create situation projects like these, it will lead to a very high income generating chain reaction. And that is what we are looking forward to, that how two things. Number one, how the aggregate supply productivity of Indian labor rises so that we can shift the aggregate supply curve further. And second, the income unleashed because of these high income generating projects which have been initiated. How will that create a scenario where more number of people will have more money? When we are talking about raising the GDP and more number of people having more money, this definitely talks about a lot of opportunities for project managers. New projects will come up. These kind of projects are large mega projects. These may have already been factored in. Companies would have taken all these things. But the moment these things will happen, it will create a redistribution of income within the economy and a much larger, the habits of the people is going to change a lot. For example, we talk about e-commerce, we talk about fintech. The amount of innovation which is happening in fintech, it is going to create immense opportunities for project managers. Of course, there is one challenge, as we told you, that these days, if you look at the input prices, so you have copper going up. We have very, very less supply of chips, which are going into semiconductor chips, which are going into auto industry and electronics industry, almost everywhere, telecom. And we see auto industry is dwindling under this. The revenues of Maruti Suzuki is expected to come down by 60%. So overall, you may take steel, you may take zinc, you may take steel, I mentioned aluminum. All these prices, crude oil, gas, all these things have been rising in past. So if they rise in past, what happens to the aggregate supply curve? It tends to come down. And if it goes back, your GDP also goes back, income goes back, plus the price in the economy rises. This combination of GDP falling, accompanied by price level rising, this is the worst disease that a country can have. And this is named as stagflation. Some countries will get into this problem. Whether India is able to steer out of this, we will see. But there is a large likelihood that India may steer out of stagflation, but many other countries may get into it. And that would again be a kind of advantage. I would say that it will create an advantage for them. A large number of people have been showing their concern about low credit growth rate. Credit growth rate is that how much of loans the Indian industry and retailers they are taking from the banks. So we see that August 2020 it was around nearly 10%. It has come down sharply now, although it is growing, and it is somewhere around 6%. So what is a very good credit growth? There was an economist, he said that in past, we had seen credit growth rate as high as around 25, 27%. When was this? So we see that this 27% growth rate is just after the global financial crisis. This is where an excessive usage of monetary policy and fiscal policy was done, and the credit growth rate rose. And some people are trying to compare this figure of today with this figure of 2009, 2010. But what happened after that? The moment you have increased so much of rampant, this is rampant loan giving. Ultimately, the projects got stalled. They were not great projects. They got stalled. And hence we see that the credit growth rate has been falling. By 2014, it had come down to 6%. And then we've been struggling because the industry, the companies, this particular rampant lending that has happened, and it has been happening earlier also, 20%. This is very, very high. How come so much of loan was being given? Were our banks so rich that we could provide so much of money? Our banks were never so rich. And yet we provided this kind of a money. And ultimately what happened? The banks are laden with NPAs, non-performing assets. The ability of banks' balance sheet has gone down. They cannot lend much. And companies' balance sheet has also gone down. So this together, this impact is called twin balance sheet impact. We can look at experiences of other countries also. So this is credit growth rate of Germany. So when we are struggling, our credit growth rate is being criticized at 6% or so during this time. Look at Germany, which is considered to be recently Angela Merkel has been praised so much about the governance. But what is happening to credit growth? This is negative, negative, negative. We are somewhere around, we've been between 5 to 6% for several months, past several months, and they are into negative. And what about the history of their credit growth rate? So July 20, it was 8%, somewhere ours was around 9%. And otherwise, when the country, Germany, grew, what is the average credit growth rate? This is very low. It is just very near to zero or 5%. That means it is normal to have 5-6% of growth rate and do very well. And then there is a sudden increase. It goes up to 40%, 37%. When same time when India's credit growth rate went up to 27%, almost during the same period. And after that, what happens? Here also there is a sharp decline. This shows that this is excessive money, excessive lending which is being done. If it can happen to as prosperous a country as Germany, so you can well imagine what will happen for India. So now the question, can India replace China in bringing global inflation down? So China became world's factory on account of cheap resource cost and hence helped curbing global inflation. China is a much richer nation now and fast losing the cheap resource advantage. So per capita income in China has been rising. Their currency is gaining appreciation, because of which their exports become much more expensive. Who can replace them? So in India, can India replace that? So if I see that as per capita income basis, India is ranked. Any idea where India is ranked?
Almost more than 100.
Yeah, it is ranked 145 out of 194 countries.
Yeah, yes.
In order to make them this standard of living so high that we become incompetitive in terms of pricing, it will take a huge amount of growth. We have a huge capacity to grow. Then there are some geopolitical things also happening, where we see that China's Belt and Road Initiative, through which they were trying to increase their competence and influence all around the world in accessing cheap resources and providing their Chinese products. That is being countered now by the Quad group that has been created between Australia, Japan, US, and India. And recently, I mean, few days I would have read, China has influenced the World Bank in order to give them a better ease of doing business rating. And this is being now inquired about. And one of the leading people has already resigned. So this further will create a favorable impact on India, that China's ease of doing business, if it is fudged, so maybe we can shift the businesses to India. As such, after the pandemic, the countries are very angry, and a lot of supply chains, you must already knowing, a lot of supply chains are being redesigned, and India is seen to be benefiting. So India's what can help India bring inflation down? Number one, it is it is a country with very low per capita income. So in order to make the wage rate high enough, or the cost of living high enough, we can accommodate in the process a huge amount of GDP growth. Then it is a very vast country, and it has actually got resources, and it can actually become, if not a manufacturing powerhouse as China, but at least if it becomes even 60% of that, 70% of that, it would be a great benefit. And just imagine the amount of opportunities that project managers will have, even if we reach around 40% of the potential of 40% increase in the production potential that we have now. And of course, the young population is has been talked about a lot, and it has also been criticized a lot. Criticized because we do not have good skills. Our our engineers say that 85% of our engineers are unemployed. But here, a large amount of a huge initiative is being taken through the new education policy, where we are allowing that the traditional courses, they can have a lot of online classes permitted. And hence, the scarce resource of teachers, good teachers, will be available to larger amount of public in the country. And a huge amount of work is being done on that. And of course, IT companies are benefiting a lot because of that. There is no denying that we are a powerhouse in terms of IT skills. And as with variety of projects that we talked about, and which like this Sagarmala project. Now we are wanting logistics, which is around 14% of the GDP. The cost of logistics in India is exorbitant, 14% of the GDP. So we have projects which are around 610 projects worth 7 lakh crores of connecting all the ports with the roads and improving. This is a huge project. Then we have Bharatmala project, which is about roads initiatives, which is connecting all the corners of the country. Then we have national waterways connecting various rivers, and the work has already started. The money is being spent. A huge amount of bridges. This is only one example, which is going to Janab Bridge, which is the highest bridge. But there is a full initiative of building huge amount of bridges so that the connectivities and the cost to transfer goods from one point to other, it reduces. All this is going to, number one, increase the velocity of money. Velocity of money means the rate at which money changes hands from one person to other person. If it moves faster, so the people are expected to become richer faster. And also, it is going to increase the mobility of the people, not just money. It is going to increase the mobility of the people. And hence, what will happen? As we have access, suppose this was a hotspot, a hub of various activities. Now, this point is also connected, and this point is also connected. So there will be a lot of change in the business processes. And this is where new project managers are going to gain a lot. We just have to observe in a particular area how the connectivity, mobility, and faster movement of information is going to change the landscape, and new designing of projects will definitely be required. Cloud computing market is immense opportunity. It's already by 2025, we are expecting around $832 billion of this industry. And even if we get, let's say, 5% of that, 10% of that, a huge amount of money will accrue. So I think I'll stop here, and I'm open for any questions that the group would like to ask. Although it was very fast, but I really don't.
Yeah. So, guys, everyone, if you have any questions, you can type either in Q&A box or in chat window, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. In the meantime,
Hi there.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Ramesh from Visakhapatnam. Earlier you were
Can you
speaking about the
speak a little
inflation
louder?
rate.
I'm not able to.
Yeah, you were comparing the inflation rates of India, China, and US, right? They were having
Yes.
lower inflation rates as compared to India.
Yes.
I mean, over the years, what's hindering India better the China or US? I mean, what measures is India taking to overtake, beat China or India? I mean, what's stopping them, or how could it do it? How could India be better, be a better nation, but economically?
Yeah. So most important in this is uh, the amount of initiative that IT sector is showing.
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir.
My voice is breaking.
Yeah.
So the amount of initiative that IT sector is showing and which is improving the productivity in terms of faster movement, faster documentation. For example, exports. We are with IT initiatives, we are able to reduce the documentation procedures by a very large amount, which is going to increase the ease of doing business. These kind of things will definitely lead to this. If this is the demand curve and this was the aggregate supply curve, this aggregate supply curve will be pushed, and hence the price levels in India, any manufacturing that happens in India, it will definitely see a downward growth. In India's logistics sector is 14% cost of the GDP. On an average, we see around 6% to 8%. This kind of huge reduction, which is possible, this is not available with other countries. So what are the instruments through which other countries are going to improve their costs? It is very difficult for them. The aging is itself creating them a problem. US already has a huge amount of infrastructure which needs to be replaced. It is crumbling. It needs to be replaced. And they had earlier made this infrastructure when the prices were low. Today, if they are going to create this infrastructure, so this is going to cost them much higher. China, there is the geopolitical move of of various countries is going to reduce the ability of China to be as cost effective. So what will happen if, as China loses its cost advantage, a large amount of business will flow to other countries. And if it, let's say even 20% of that comes to India, we will benefit a lot. So, and these IT initiatives, definitely they are going to increase the aggregate supply to a large extent in India. This is what I feel.
Yeah, saying how Quad and then AUKUS is going to impact Chinese economy. What is the impact? I mean, what is the whole philosophy behind that Quad and then AUKUS?
How Quad is going to affect the Chinese economy?
Yeah, how it is going to impact both AUKUS and then Quad?
So AUKUS is oriented towards defense partnership, and so if Australia is being provided more amount of defense, and hence they can so China's bullying to various small economies in that region of our Southeast Asian region, it will that bullying factor will decrease a lot. And because of that, there is quite a possibility that various initiatives that China starts, like Belt and Road initiatives, or recently their advances in Sri Lanka. Earlier, they wanted to get more foothold in Maldives. Gradually, Maldives has been pulled back into India. The way they have total, almost all control over Bangladesh. ONGC goes and produces gas in Bangladesh, but Bangladesh does not sell it to us. It is wanting to sell to China. It in fact created a pipeline which will take the entire gas to China, and India doesn't get that. So the moment Australia becomes stronger in this region with defense side, the bullying on part of China, which is happening in South China Sea also and all around, it will tend to come down. And hence, the economic uh, uh, treaties which China is doing these days with various countries, that will also reduce to a very large extent. We've already seen uh, uh, Pakistan is getting totally bankrupt, and it is China which is going to benefit out of this. But other countries are seeing that how reliable China is as a partner. We recently, in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, which is about Central Asian countries, including India, Pakistan, China, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, all these countries. What Prime Minister has said is that let us look at the transparency of the various deals where we are honoring all the sovereign independences of the countries. And whichsoever country has taken help of China in recent past, we see that it is gradually becoming bankrupt. Sri Lanka, you can search in news. Sri Lanka at one point of time before the pandemic, 3 years or 4 years back, uh, before that bombing happened in Sri Lanka, all economic indicators of Sri Lanka were better than India's. And today there is so much of scarcity that the president has imposed food emergency in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had to default on some loans which they had taken from other countries, which were dollar-denominated loans. And now China has bailed them out by a swap deal. But at the same time, now we are seeing that through Quad, maybe India did not have so much of influence, though India has wanted to have more influence in Sri Lanka. But because of the past relationships, Sri Lanka is very wary about India's initiatives. So, but with Quad coming in, AUKUS coming in, we will definitely see that geopolitical moving will be such that these small countries, which are giving strategic importance to China in terms of providing their seas or their land for China to access control, that will reduce to a very large extent.
Thank you, sir.
Can you throw some light on a few countries, a few Scandinavian countries and Australia and Singapore? Singapore, anyway, I understand it's a very small country. Their economy is managed very well. But is there any learning for India, though they are small countries, Scandinavian countries, but in terms of per capita income, etc., they rate far, far high, and they are most livable countries in the world. Is there anything which, because we don't come to know much about those countries, what grade they are doing, why their per capita income is so high, why people are so happy there? I just, Amina, can you briefly explain that?
So, if you look at Norway, Norway has huge amount of oil reserves. Finland, huge amount of natural resources in terms of wood. Uh, Australia has all commodities, in abundance of commodities. So right from the beginning, these people had a lot of, they were mineral rich countries. Number two, the population has been pretty low in these countries. In India, the population has tended to hold back. A large amount of illiterate population has held back skill development in the country. Whereas those countries, now Norway is one of the largest foreign exchange earners, one of the largest foreign exchange earners from oil resources. And they keep outside that the money that they earn from oil, they keep it outside the national income of the country. Otherwise, so much of money will come into the economy that inflation will zoom past any other country. So they keep a separate account. But definitely the education in those Scandinavian countries has always been, right from the beginning, has been given a lot of importance, and hence the innovative and productivity of those countries has been very good. Unfortunately, we do compare about the livability there and the amount of social welfare which is available there. But now that is coming to hit them bad. With so much of social convenience being provided, the students in Scandinavian countries, they do not find so much of interest in developing skills now. Why? The life is so comfortable that they don't feel like developing those kind of skills which are required to dominate the world. And hence you would see there are excellent education opportunities in those countries, but largely it is the foreigners who go and take advantage of that. The resident local, their interest in skill development is gradually coming down, which is going to drag these countries unless they do something about it. Australia has been, it is so mineral rich. You look at um, most of the coal that we see these days. Adani has opened a port there, and it went and bought some coal mines. So these mineral rich countries, they will definitely, and with low population, it makes so much of, it makes things so easy for them. With our population, US population is 330 million. Our poor population, below poverty line population, is 330 million.
Correct. Yes, much
Where will we
more
take
than that
this?
official
Where will we take
numbers.
this drag? If we compare number of billionaires, then India would be considered amongst the top countries. But overall, in terms of per capita and availability of social infrastructure, that will remain very, very poor. But that again, today it gives us a big advantage because that will allow us to grow fast. In Scandinavian countries, people do not want to marry, people do not, and there was a time when they used to produce a lot of kids. Ask today, this willingness to bear a child from both husband and wife, it has declined so much. In fact, this is in entire Europe. So for the time being, India, I see that if we look at any production function, output is dependent on inputs, Y1, Y2, Y3, different inputs. Now, if one input is missing, for example, in automobile industry, we saw that chips are missing. And this is leading to companies, their profitability coming down by 60%. So imagine at a country level, various inputs. One of the inputs is human resource. Can everything be done? Can everything be done through robots? No, at least consumption has to be done. Where is this human resource? So it may be all European nations will suffer from this constraint. Their production ability will decline because of this particular constraint. And this is now holding true even for China. Because of their one child policy, now they see that the population is aging very fast. Second, very, very important aspect is that now Chinese leadership is wanting to reduce inequality. Whenever an economy tries to reduce inequality, so incentive to earn more and make money, it reduces. So the capitalists, look at Jack Ma, what has happened? Suddenly he's out of the scene. He was the poster boy of China, and now we don't see him anywhere. So this initiative of improving inequality in China, number two, reducing pollution. Their steel output, they had around more than 50% of the global steel output market share. But steel production has also led to so much of pollution. Now they need to control the pollution. In order to control the pollution, the output will come down. So these two factors, the inequality, reduction in inequality, will reduce the incentive to earn more. Number two, in order to reduce the pollution, the output will definitely come down. Number three, the geopolitical reasons. Number four, the aging. And number five, there is a new movement called chill out movement amongst the young of Chinese. They say that our parents worked so very hard, what did they get? So if I work very hard, what will I get? So this is going to lose, China is going to lose on productivity. And these factors together are going to shrink China's ability to influence the world. And that is where the opportunity lies for our country. And we have company of all the advanced economies with us. They are pitting India against China, that it's only India which can stop China in the economic supremacy that China has.
I agree with your optimism, but the thing is still I am somewhat skeptical about if I want to name 5 big infrastructure companies, it is very difficult. I mean, no, L&T kind of size, you don't have 5 rank. I mean, though you can rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but whether fifth one is what would be the size of first one, that challenge is there. So great amount of infrastructure spending is happening, but whether we would be, I mean, yes, I mean, now it is an open economy. I mean, all global players can come and we can also learn from them, technology collaboration, all this, but still we don't have, I mean, globally comparable banks. Yes, Indian economic system is one of the robust, I agree, but we don't have large banks, we don't have large infrastructure companies. So all these opportunities are there, but whether we would be able to capture this opportunity, capitalize this opportunity.
Totally agree with you on these accounts. But what I am pinning my hopes on is that the structure of the economies is going to change a lot. So where we relied on our highways and railways and airways so much, okay, highways and railways largely within an economy uh, for mobility, and which became a medium to increase business. That infrastructure is now gradually shifting towards, IT infrastructure. So if roads were the highways to development in the past, and we had to spend a lot of money in building roads, so very soon we are seeing, since there will be a lot of um, uh, digitization, the kind of digitization which is happening, and online platforms are going to work so much and contribute into the economy. India may not actually have to spend so much on infrastructure as China and US had to spend. So if mobility, for example, if mobility is restricted, if I'm working from home and I'm making a lot of meetings, I'm doing a lot of meetings from my office only or from my home only or where. So the travel requirements which are going to reduce, it is going to reduce the pressure on physical infrastructure. This is where the entire composition of contribution to the GDP is going to change in favor of IT and IT enabled services.
Yeah, I perfectly agree, because
Movement of
efficiencies
goods,
will increase
movement of goods
actually.
will continue to happen. Movement
Yeah.
of goods will continue to rely on
Yes,
roads and rail
yes, yes.
and
But efficiency will increase. Yeah, technology
yes,
will help a
efficiency
lot.
is
Yeah.
also. Yeah, that's right.
Great.
That's right. This is what we are hoping for. And the way cloud computing is helping create that kind of infrastructure, the way Internet of Things is leading to efficiency gains. Netherlands, you look at Netherlands, such a tiny country, but because of Internet of Things, it has become the largest exporter of agricultural produce. Can you imagine? If that kind of Internet of Things works here in India with so much of capacity in terms of land, just imagine we can produce for the entire world.
Yes, agreed.
This is the efficiency gains which I am hoping for. But of course, I respect each point that you have mentioned. The ability, the banking sector, although it is now we see that it is improving because non-performing assets have declined substantially during last 2 years. At one point of time, it seemed that as if it is totally unsustainable.
It has greatly improved, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, before taking to the next question, Dr. VP Singh, can I share my screen? I have a couple of announcements.
Certainly.
Right. Thank you so much. All right. So, okay. So we have Gyan Lahari event, which is an annual conference from PMI PCC, is coming up on 25th and 26th of September with a theme called Change Makers, Turning Ideas to Reality. For 3 days, 18th, 19th, and 20th, on behalf of 20th anniversary of this Hyderabad chapter, there is a special offer going on. So you can register for this particular event. I have sent the link and the steps in chat window for all the people. So here are the steps. You can just get into the link which I shared in the chat window. Use the code called PCC20 to get the 20th anniversary offer on that conference. Okay, so I would request every one of the participants avail this opportunity and register before it expires. So 18th, 19th, and 20th, we are running this particular offers exclusively for the PCC members, Pearl City chapter members, and also PMI members. And this is the offer that we are offering for all the participants in this KSS session. Okay. PDUs for all the participants will send a code through the mailer. You can use that particular code for having this PDUs in your account. Okay. All right. So that's my side. Any other questions we can take now?
Yeah, I have one question. What impact did it have on China and India when India decided to ban all the Chinese apps?
I lost your voice. You were saying something about.
Can you listen to me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, when India has decided to ban Chinese apps, what impact did it have on both India and China?
So in terms of monetary benefit, economic benefits, I am not very sure. I have not had access to that data. But in terms of geopolitical positioning, it has benefited India immensely. And we are able to form a group with countries in which is a stronger ties, stronger bond in order to repulse any kind of aggressive movement which is going to happen from China. Number two, it also shows that there was a time when people thought that their Chinese goods have penetrated Indian market so much that we will not be able to live without Chinese goods. So this signal needed to be given to China that we can live without the Chinese goods. And a signal also had to be given to Indian entrepreneurs that in case we are banning these kind of things. We are not accepting Chinese goods in one way or the other, whichever way. So are you ready to seize the opportunity or not? Unless these signals are given, you know, all this while in India's history, we have kept a strong rupee policy. I remember when I was in school, $1 was equal to 7 rupees. In 75, $1 was equal to 7 rupees. Was India's economic situation better at that time as compared to now? No, no way. In 1947, $1 was equal to 1 rupee. Why did we have such a strong rupee dollar exchange rate? Because we wanted to protect ourselves from imports from other countries. And that killed our entrepreneurial streak. For so many years, people did not even dream, the companies did not even dream of exporting. And we went up to the verge of bankruptcy in 1991. That opened our eyes that we need to be more courageous. And we have to say no. And we need to allow our entrepreneurs to develop. So if this thinking keeps getting into us that we cannot compete with China and we cannot live without Chinese goods, so this signal needs to be given to our entrepreneurs as well as to Chinese. Unless that happens, there is a lot of psychology in economic supremacy. So as now we see that Bajaj is beating Chinese production, the scooter market in Africa. So that shows that we can live without Chinese goods and our entrepreneurs will be able to produce that, but they should be ready for it. Unless we start saying no, of course, it will have cost disadvantage initially to us. Solar panels. Chinese killed the entire global solar panel industry by creating so much of monopoly. Now our developers will say that why should I buy expensive solar panels here in India when I can get it cheap in China? But if we keep getting it cheap from China, will we be ever able to create that competence of developing solar modules within the country? One day we've got to say no. And this is what was done. And that is the benefit I feel has happened in our country and globally. But you were probably asking for a question in terms of economic benefits immediately in terms of import and export. That figure I do not have. I'm sorry, but I will try to search and maybe I will send it to Praveen sometime.
Sure, thank you.
But does that make sense the way I was explaining this?
I mean, you could expand it to the larger horizon. I would be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Any other questions from anyone? Let me check the chat window if there are any other questions. Okay, there was one question that I have seen earlier. Give me a second, sir, and I'll read it out. Okay, what about disinvestments while the investments are up? That's the question by Vijay.
So that's also, we will have to look at the philosophy of disinvestment. So a government, where should the government invest? So the government will invest in those kind of projects where the private sector at present is not either willing because it doesn't see a good market developing, or the private sector is short of funds. Those are the areas where the government should start investing. And then there are some investments which the government has made which are not working, which are not functioning, and it is a drain to the uh, to the tax revenues that the government collects. Should we continue to finance those businesses which which have been draining us from resources? These two philosophies are to be seen. Now, a large number of people said why BPCL is being sold. BPCL is a profitable company. When BPCL is being sold, it shows the intent of the government that we do not want to be present in so many oil companies. The idea is that if there are three big, large oil companies available in the economy, so they can reap the economies of scale benefit, and also a presence of some private players and some government player will keep on giving a good balance in this. So BPCL is some asset which has been profitable for the government. If they sell it off and use that money where? Create more assets. What are the new assets being created which will have value in future? Let us say metro. Let us say UPI. Let us say uh, a large number of new airports which are being developed. A huge amount of investment going into ports where other people are not willing to invest. The aviation sector, not many people are ready to invest in the airports. If the government can help build those assets and they become profitable and sell it and then create some more assets for the country. It is when the government monetizes the assets, it doesn't mean that it has sold the asset to someone else. If there is a private contractor on New Delhi's railway station, that does not mean that the New Delhi railway station is owned by that contractor or that land where he runs the restaurant is owned by him. So monetizing of asset is an important strategy, and it depends that now so much of money is being spent on Bharat Mala project. Where will the money come from? Should we take it from our tax resources? The tax resources are so less. A large number of people were at one point of time complaining that our fiscal package to bail the country out of COVID is much lesser than what US has presented. The comparison between what US earns and what US government earns and what India earns is just not, you can't compare. If US budget allows them to spend 100 rupees on its 300 million population, you know how much money Indian government gets to spend on 3 times its population? 9 rupees against 100 rupees on 1/3 of the population. Indian government gets 9 rupees. From where will you create that kind of an asset? So this activity of any asset which has become profitable or which is a drain on your resources, they need to be disposed of as quickly whenever the time requires. So Air India has to be disposed of. It has taken a lot of resources. If 5 years back it had been sold off, we would have got much more money. So disinvestment philosophy has to be understood. Disinvestment is about disposing of those assets which are either drained to the government or they have added a lot of value. So value has to be reaped and that money has to be spent on creating new assets. Look at how many public sector undertakings, new public sector undertakings that have been created. We don't even search for it. In last several years, we have added around 100 central public sector enterprises. I would not remember the names as such, but at one time I was looking for this, that where is this money going? So much of spend on infrastructure that is happening, it is happening from there. These will become valuable. Why should the government own a road? After some times, when we are all very independent, this road, if anyone else, private sector wants to buy it, let them buy it. And gradually, let me tell you, all these PSUs that we talk about, did government start that? Indian Oil Corporation was not Indian Oil Corporation. It was a private sector company which was nationalized. The State Bank of India that we have as national asset, it was not a national asset. These were all private banks which have been nationalized. So tomorrow, if the government sees that too much of asset has been given in private hands and it is creating a problem, then government will go and acquire it. So the government is not going to get bankrupt because of this. It will never happen. I think that's what I wanted to say towards disinvestment.
Thank you.
Any other questions we have?
Any other questions, anyone? You can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Let me check chat window if there are any questions.
I don't think there are any questions, and it's 8 o'clock already.
Yeah, it's already 8 o'clock. You're right. Yeah, yeah, time flies like anything. Any other questions, guys? Anyone? If you want, you can unmute yourself and question. All right. So it looks like there are no other questions. Okay. So thanks everyone for taking your Saturday evening the joining. Thank you so much for Dr. VP Singh, your time, your insightful thoughts about the economics and how the inflation, investments across the globe, how it are all happening. And it's a very eventful and informative session. Thank you so much for your time and spending this evening with all of our PMI PCC members and others who joined. I really thank all our volunteers who helped us socializing this event, communications team, membership team, and also the board of directors who has helped us in conducting the session, especially Saujanya. Thank you so much for bringing Dr. VP Singh to us and having this eventful and informative session. Okay, thank you so much. If you all have any other questions, we'll stay back for another 3-4 minutes. You can just send any of your questions through chat window or the message through Q&A.
Thank you so much. And we are into a sweet spot. There may be a lot of constraints and people may be painting a different picture about India. But yeah. It is to be seen whether we are ready for the opportunities which are coming up or not. Whether we are skilled enough to get into those opportunities or not. And there is a lot of opportunities. The efficiency is going to increase manifold. Challenges will also increase, but that is where the benefit, you ultimately, what do you enjoy? When you overcome a particular challenge, that is what we enjoy.
Yep.
When we build productivity, that is what we relish. And joy is largely not in consuming, joy is in creating. So that is with this philosophy, I feel like if everybody gets into the creation mode and skills themselves, such huge population, but because of variety of problems, IT, Internet of Things and IT is going to be a blessing for this country. And we will grow very strong. And there will be a lot of opportunities for all of you. Project managers are associated with risk taking, and there are a lot of risks. And I see that the risk associated with Indian economies are gradually declining. So an excellent future for all of you.
So participants, you'll get a mail about the PDUs to your mail ID. A code will be there. You can use that and claim your PDUs. All right. Okay.
Right.
If there are
Thank
any
you.
other questions, we can address it, or you can send us to our mail ID.
If there are any questions, you can send through email.
Yeah.
I'll be
Yeah.
happy to respond.
Yes. All right.
Thank you so much. I am signing off now.
So much everyone for joining the session, and this recording will be posted soon in the YouTube channel. You can watch it again for your convenience. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And have a good night and happy weekend to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. VP Singh.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, VP Singh, sir. It's a
Thank you so
wonderful
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, and let me end the meeting for all. Okay.